Captain stood on the bridge of the Steadfast and looked at the stars. They were far from Earth now, farther than any human ship had gone before. The mission was simple: map the outer rim, find new planets, make friends with alien species if they found any. Had been a captain for 12 years, but he had only been exploring space for 3. Humans were new to this whole thing. 20 years ago, they didn't even know aliens existed. Then the Conquered found Earth. The Conquered was big, really big. 47 different alien species, all working together under something they called civilized rules. "Captain, we're picking up a signal," said his first officer. She was young but smart, trusted her completely. "What kind of signal?" asked. "It's a ship, a big one. Actually, it's a whole fleet." His fingers moved across her screen. "There." Knew about the. Everyone did. They were one of the oldest species in the Conquered. They had been exploring space for over 3,000 years. Humans. Humans had barely figured out how to leave their own solar system 200 years ago. There were warriors, that's what all the reports said, but not the kind of warriors humans understood. They fought with rules, honor, ceremonies. They treated war like it was some kind of art form. "Should we contact them?" asked. "Yes, open a channel, let's be friendly." The screen flickered, appeared. He was tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like purple metal. His face had too many eyes, tried not to stare. "I am Fleet Master of the Empire," the alien said. His voice was deep and strange. "You have entered the sector. This space belongs to the." Smiled, trying to be polite. "I'm captain of the human vessel Steadfast. We're on an exploration mission. We didn't know this sector was claimed. We can leave if—" "No," interrupted. "The Conquered law is clear. When 2 species claim the same territory, there must be a challenge of territory. We will fight. The winner keeps the sector." Turned to with wide eyes, felt his stomach drop. A fight already. "Fleet Master, we don't want to fight. We're explorers, not soldiers." Many eyes blinked. "Are you refusing the challenge? That would bring great shame to your species. The Conquered would laugh at you for generations." Took a deep breath. "No, we accept, but we need time to prepare. We've never done one of these challenges before." 48 hours, said. "That is the law. The battle will occur at the coordinates I'm sending now. Come with honor, human. Show us what your species can do." The screen went dark. Stared at what just happened. "I think we just got challenged to a war," said quietly. Over the next 2 days, learned everything he could about Conquered warfare. It was nothing like human warfare. Nothing at all. There were rules, so many rules. Both sides had to agree on the time and place of battle. Only certain weapons were allowed. You couldn't attack civilian ships. You couldn't chase an enemy if they retreated. If one side surrendered, the fight stopped immediately. It was like a game, a deadly game, but still a game. Called Admiral Bin back on Earth. Bin was in charge of all human military forces. He was old, smart, and had fought in 3 wars before humanity joined the Conquered. "They want us to fight like it's a school dance," Bin said, shaking his head on the screen. "Announce when you're going to punch someone. Use only approved punches. Don't hit too hard. Stop when someone says stop." "Can we win?" asked. Bin was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, we've never fought like this. Our weapons are good, our people are trained, but this is something else." "What should I do?" "Follow their rules, be smart, and remember what I taught you. In any fight, the goal is to go home alive. Honor is good, but breathing is better." When the 48 hours were up, took the Steadfast and 3 smaller ships to the meeting point. It was near a gas giant, a huge planet with rings of ice and rock. They were already there, had 15 ships. They were beautiful ships, decorated with symbols and colors. They moved in perfect formation like dancers in space. Ships looked plain next to them. Human ships were built for function, not beauty. They were gray and simple and strong. "Captain, they're hailing us," said. Appeared on screen again. "Human captain, The challenge begins now. May the worthiest species claim this territory. Good luck to you too, said. The battle started slowly. The ships moved in patterns, circling and positioning themselves. Realized they were performing some kind of tactical dance. It was beautiful to watch, but it made no sense. Should we mirror their formation? Asked. No, said. We don't know their dance. Do what we know, spread out, cover each other, be unpredictable. The human ships broke formation. They scattered in different directions. The ships seemed confused. They kept their pattern, but it was clear they didn't know how to respond to chaos. Ordered the first strike. It was quick and efficient. One of the ships took damage to its engines, not enough to destroy it, but enough to force it to retreat. His face appeared on screen. He looked angry. That was not honorable. You did not announce your attack pattern. The rules don't say we have to, replied. We're following the law, just not the way you expected. The battle continued for 3 hours. Ships fought hard. They used every trick they knew, but they had more ships and better weapons. In the end, 2 of ships had to retreat. The one. But something was wrong, could see it on his face. The fleet master didn't look happy, he looked disturbed. The sector belongs to the, announced. But know this, human, your species fights without grace, without beauty, like animals, not warriors. Felt angry, but he kept his voice calm. We fought within the rules, that's what matters, isn't it? Said nothing, the screen went dark. Turn 2, we lost. Yes, said, but I don't think they feel like they won. Did you see his face? He was scared of us. Why we lost? Looked out at the stars. Because we didn't fight the way they expected. To them, war is a ceremony, but to us, war is just war, and I think that terrifies them. Back on Earth, Admiral Bin read's report with growing concern. The conquered species thought war was a game. They had forgotten what war really meant. Bin had fought real wars. Wars where cities burned and millions died. Wars where the only rule was survival. He looked at the reports about conquered conflicts. Battles with 50 casualties were considered huge tragedies. 50 casualties. Bin had commanded battles where 50,000 died in a single day. He hoped the conquered would leave humanity alone. Because if they ever pushed humans into a real war, the galaxy would learn a terrible lesson. Some species remember what war truly is, and humans had 10,000 years of practice. The Conquered Council met on the station called Unity. It was a massive structure that floated between 3 stars. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber when important matters needed discussion. Today, they were discussing humans. Admiral Bin stood in the center of the chamber. Around him, aliens of every shape and size watched from their seats. Some had wings. Some had tentacles. Some looked almost human, while others looked like nothing from Earth at all. The speaker of the council was a being called Moth. His species had been part of the conquered for 2,000 years. He looked at Bin with what might have been pity. Admiral Bin, Moth said, his voice echoing through the chamber. We have reviewed your species' first territorial challenge. Fleet Master has filed a complaint. What kind of complaint? Bin asked. He says your tactics were dishonorable, that your captain fought without grace or dignity, that humans fight like, and I quote, primitive savages. Bin felt his jaw tight. He forced himself to stay calm. My captain followed every rule. We checked. 3 times we broke no laws. That is true, Moth agreed. But you broke something else. You broke tradition. You broke the understanding that has kept conquered warfare civilized for 800 years. A small human woman stepped forward. Her name was Doctor. She was someone who studied alien cultures. She had been trying to explain this problem to Earth's government for months. Honored speaker, said, her voice clear and strong. May I address the council? Moth nodded. You may speak. Looked around the chamber. I have studied your histories, all of you. Do you know what I found? For the last 8 centuries you've had peace. real peace. Yes, you have wars, but they're not really wars. They're contests, tournaments. You limit casualties, you protect civilians, you stop when someone surrenders. Yes, Moth said. That is what separates us from barbarians. We have evolved past mindless slaughter. But you didn't evolve past it, said quietly. You chose to forget it. There's a difference. The chamber, filled with angry whispers, continued. Humans haven't forgotten. We can't. 200 years ago, we almost destroyed ourselves. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare. We came so close to extinction that we can still taste it. We remember what real war is. And I'm trying to tell you, what you call war, that's not war, that's theater. Moth's expression was hard to read. Doctor, are you suggesting that we should return to barbarism, that we should kill without restraint? No, said quickly. I'm saying you need to understand that humans are different. We're trying to follow your rules. We really are. But our entire history has taught us different lessons. When you challenge us to war, even a civilized one, you're waking up something in us that you don't understand. Then perhaps, said a voice from the council, humans should not be part of the conquered. Ben stepped forward. We want to be part of the conquered. We believe in peace, but you need to be patient with us. We're learning. Moth was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. The council accepts your words. We will be patient. But know this, Admiral Ben. If humanity cannot learn to fight with honor, there will be consequences. 3 months later, those consequences arrived. Captain was on the Steadfast, exploring a system near the colony. Was a human settlement, home to 50,000 people. It was a farming world, peaceful and quiet. Captain said urgently, I'm picking up multiple signatures. A whole fleet just dropped out of faster-than-light travel near. His blood went cold. How many ships? 30, maybe more. 30 for a farming colony. The communication screen flickered. Fleet Master appeared. He looked different now, harder, angrier. Captain said, the Empire is issuing a challenge of territory for the system and 2 other human colonies. Under conquered law, you have 48 hours to respond. Has no military protested. They're farmers. Then they will surrender quickly. The law is clear. We claim this territory. If you wish to contest it, bring your ships. The screen went dark. Looked terrified. Can they do this? Apparently yes, said bitterly. Contact Earth. Contact everyone. We need help now. Governor ran colony. She was a tough woman who had helped build the settlement from nothing. When she heard about the challenge, she called an emergency meeting. They want us to just give up, asked Park, the head of the farming cooperative. We've been here for 15 years. The conquered law says we can contest it, explained. But that means war, and we have no weapons, no military ships, nothing. So we lose either way, said a young woman named. She ran the colony's school. Shook her head. Not necessarily. Earth is sending ships. Admiral Ben is coming himself with everything he can spare, but it will take time. How much time? 2 weeks, maybe 3. The challenge is in 48 hours, Park said. That's not enough time. Looked around the room. Then we stall. We make them think we're surrendering. We buy time for our ships to arrive. But they didn't wait. They followed the law exactly. 48 hours after the challenge, their ships moved into position around. Sent a message to the colony. Governor, no human ships have arrived to contest our claim. Under conquered law now belongs to the Empire. You and your people must leave within 10 days. Stared at the screen. 10 days to pack up 15 years of work. 10 days to abandon their homes. No, she said quietly. What? Looked surprised. I said no, we're not leaving, this is our home. Governor, you have no ships, no weapons, you cannot fight us. Watch us. Once troops landed on to take control, they expected cooperation. That's how it always worked in the conquered. The losing side surrendered peacefully. Everyone followed the rules. But when the soldiers entered the main town, they found it empty. Buildings were locked. Equipment was gone. The humans had vanished. "Where are they?" asked ground commander. They found out 3 hours later. A transport truck exploded on a country road. Then another. Then a supply depot caught fire. The humans weren't fighting like conquered species. They were using guerrilla tactics, hit and run, sabotage, disappear into the countryside and strike again. Was furious. This is not honorable. This is not how surrender works. But her people didn't care about honor. They cared about their homes. Park the farmer had served in Earth's military 20 years ago. He taught the others everything he remembered: how to make simple bombs, how to set traps, how to fight dirty. They didn't know how to respond. Their rules of war didn't cover this. Civilians weren't supposed to fight. Defeated enemies weren't supposed to resist. Everything they knew about warfare told them this shouldn't be happening. Lieutenant was a tactical officer on Admiral Bin's flagship. She had been studying the situation carefully. She presented her report to Bin as they traveled toward the colony. "Admiral, they are confused," said. "They can't kill civilians under conquered law, but the civilians are fighting them. They don't know what to do." "Good," Bin said grimly. "Good, sir. It means they're starting to understand. War isn't a game. War is what happens when people have nothing left to lose." He looked at the star map. "We're still 8 days out. Can hold that long." "I think so, sir. They are playing by rules that don't work anymore. They're trying to fight with honor against people who are fighting for survival. Survival always wins." Bin nodded slowly, but he was worried. He knew his people would fight hard. He was worried about what came next. Because the Empire was proud, ancient, powerful, and humans had just embarrassed them in front of the entire conquered. Fleet Master would not forget this. They would not forgive it. Something bigger was coming. Bin could feel it in his bones. This wasn't just about one colony anymore. This was about teaching the young species a lesson, about putting humans in their place, about showing the galaxy that the Empire would not be humiliated by primitives who didn't even know how to surrender properly. And when that happened, when they decided to really push, Bin knew the conquered would see something it hadn't seen in 800 years. They would see what humans called total war, and they would finally understand why humans had almost destroyed themselves. Because humans didn't fight for honor. They didn't fight for territory or glory or tradition. They fought to win, by any means necessary. The delusion was starting to crack, and Bin wondered if the galaxy was ready for what came next. The Emperor sat on his throne and watched the reports from. His name was, and he had ruled the Empire for 300 years. He had seen many wars. He had won them all. But this was different. This was wrong. "They attack our supply lines," said his chief advisor. "They destroy our equipment at night. They refuse to fight in the open. This is not war. This is cowardice." Watched the footage of a burning transport. Human civilians had done this. People who grew food for a living. People with no military training. They were fighting like wild animals. "Fleet Master has requested permission to use stronger measures," the advisor continued. "He says the humans do not understand honor. They need to be taught." "What does the Conquered Council say?" asked. "They are concerned. Speaker Moth has called for negotiations. He wants both sides to talk." Stood from his throne. He was massive even for his 4 arms flexed with barely controlled anger. "The conquered has grown soft," he said. 800 years of gentle warfare has made them forget. They think peace comes from rules and politeness, but peace comes from strength, from fear, from making sure your enemies never dare challenge you. "My Emperor, invoke Article 17 of the Conquered Charter. Declare a war of extermination against the human species." The advisor's many eyes widened. "My Emperor, that has not been used in 8 centuries. The consequences." I know the consequences, roared. Article 17 removes all restrictions. No rules, no limits. The humans want to fight without honor. Fine. We will show them what war truly means. We will burn their colonies. We will destroy their fleets. We will make them beg for mercy. And when we are done, every species in the conquered will remember why the Empire is to be feared. The message went out across the galaxy. The Empire had declared a war of extermination against humanity. Under Article 17 of the Conquered Charter, all normal rules of warfare were suspended. There would be no restrictions, no limits, no mercy. The Conquered Council held an emergency session. Chaos filled the chamber. Nothing like this had happened in living memory. Not even the oldest species could remember the last war of extermination. Speaker Moth tried to restore order. This is madness. The humans are new to our ways. They are learning. This is too extreme. But other voices disagreed. They broke the traditions. They fight without honor. Perhaps they need to learn the hard way. Doctor stood before the council, her hands shaking. You don't understand what you're doing. You're removing the only thing that kept humans restrained. You're taking away the rules and telling us to fight for our survival. Do you know what humans do when their survival is threatened? They will surrender, said a council member. They have 1,000 ships. Humans have barely 100. This will be over quickly. No whispered, no it won't. Admiral Bin received the news while his fleet was still 2 days from. He read the declaration 3 times to make sure he understood it. War of extermination, all restrictions removed, no rules. Lieutenant stood beside him on the bridge. Admiral, what do we do? Bin was quiet for a long time. He remembered his conversation with. He remembered telling the conquered council that humans wanted peace. He remembered promising that humans would learn to fight with honor. But the had just removed honor from the equation. Send a message to Earth, Bin said quietly. Tell them to mobilize everything, every ship, every weapon, every soldier. Admiral, surely we can negotiate. They declared extermination. They want to wipe us out. You don't negotiate with that, you fight. He turned to look at her. And you fight to win. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. They wanted to destroy humanity, complete extermination, no mercy. The response was immediate. Every nation on Earth, which had spent 200 years working toward peace, remembered how to prepare for war. Factories that made farming equipment were converted to make weapons. Ships designed for exploration were retrofitted for combat. Scientists who studied stars started studying how to kill more efficiently. Engineer Myra worked at a civilian shipyard. Before the declaration, she built cargo haulers. Now, 72 hours later, her factory was producing missile systems. Can we really do this? Asked her assistant, a young man named. Myra didn't look up from her work. We did it before. 200 years ago, humanity built enough weapons to destroy ourselves 10 times over. We know how to make things that kill. We just chose to forget for a while. But this is different. This is aliens. They have technology thousands of years more advanced. They have better technology, Myra interrupted. But we have something they lost. We remember that war isn't about honor or beauty or following rules. War is about making the other side stop fighting, by any means necessary. Governor got the news about the war of extermination. She called her people together in the underground bunker they had been using as a base. They are coming with everything they have, she told them. Earth is sending help, but it will take weeks to arrive. We need to hold on. We need to make them pay for every meter of ground. Park stood up. Some of us think we should surrender. This is extermination. They're going to kill us all anyway. Why die slowly? Shook her head. Because every day we survive is one more day for Earth to prepare. Every soldier we keep busy here is one less attacking somewhere else. We're not trying to win, Park. We're trying to buy time. The school teacher raised her hand. I never thought I'd be a soldier. I teach children. I read them stories. But now Now I'm learning how to set explosives and shoot at aliens. What have we become? Survivors, said simply. We've become survivors. The attack on came 3 days later. Without the conquered rules didn't hold back. He bombarded the farms from orbit. He sent troops to clear every building. He cut off all supplies. But the humans didn't break. They moved underground. They hid in forests and mountains. They struck at night and vanished before dawn. Every patrol that entered the countryside risked ambush. Every supply convoy needed heavy guard. Lost more soldiers in 2 weeks than he had lost in his entire military career, and was just one small colony. Captain and the Steadfast reached first ahead of Admiral Bin's main fleet. He had 4 ships with him. The had 30. We can't win this fight, said. We're not trying to win, replied. We're trying to survive until Bin arrives. Hit and run, just like the people on the ground, make them chase us, waste their time. For 5 days played a deadly game of cat and mouse with his fleet. His ships were faster, more maneuverable. The ships were stronger, but they expected humans to stand and fight honorably. When ships struck and retreated, never staying in one place, the grew frustrated. Sent a message to, face me with courage, stop running like a coward. Replied simply, you wanted war without rules, welcome to it. When Admiral Bin finally arrived with the main human fleet, the battle began in earnest. 70 human ships against 80 vessels. Under normal conquered rules, this would have been a formal engagement. Lines would form, tactics would be displayed. It would have been almost beautiful. But there were no rules now. Bin threw everything at the missiles, nuclear weapons, electromagnetic pulses. He targeted their engines, their sensors, their life support. He didn't try to be honorable. He tried to win. The fleet was stronger, but they weren't prepared for this kind of warfare. They still fought in formation. They still tried to maintain dignity and grace. They still thought like warriors. Bin thought like someone who wanted to go home alive. He sacrificed 3 ships to get missiles into the flagship. He used debris fields as cover. He faked retreats to lure enemies into traps. After 3 days of brutal combat, they retreated. They had won technically. They controlled the space around, but they had lost 20 ships. The humans had lost 18. For Bin, losing 18 ships was terrible. Each one represented hundreds of lives. For losing 20 ships was unthinkable. The Empire hadn't lost 20 ships in 300 years of warfare. Back on the Emperor stared at the casualty reports. In less than a month, his empire had lost more soldiers than in the previous 3 centuries combined. How, he whispered. They are primitives, they are children. How are they doing this? His advisor spoke carefully. My emperor, they fight without restraint. They use tactics we have never seen. They do not care about honor or tradition. They only care about killing as many of us as possible before they die. Felt something he hadn't felt in 300 years of rule, fear. Increase our forces, he ordered. Send 100 ships, 200. I want the humans crushed. I want them to know the price of defying the Empire. But across the galaxy, other species were watching. They saw the casualty counts. They saw how humans fought, and they began to wonder. For 800 years, the conquered had convinced itself that war could be civilized, that violence could be controlled with rules and traditions, that honor mattered more than victory. Now, watching humans fight for their very survival, that delusion was cracking. Because the humans were proving something terrible. War wasn't a game. It never was. And the species that remembered that truth would always have an advantage over those who had forgotten. 6 months into the war, the galaxy could barely recognize what was happening. The conquered species gathered their information and tried to understand. The numbers didn't make sense. The Empire had sent 300 ships to human space. They had superior technology. They had 3,000 years of military tradition. They should have won in weeks. Instead, half their fleet was damaged or destroyed. Instead, human colonies still fought. Instead, the Emperor was calling for more ships, more troops, more everything. Commander Ho led a special operations team deep into territory. His mission wasn't to fight ships or capture planets. His mission was to hurt the enemy where they didn't expect it. "Target is ahead," whispered Lee, his second in command. "Fuel depot, supplies 60 ships." "Security?" Ho asked. "Light, they don't expect us here. We're 3 systems behind their front lines." Ho smiled without humor. "They still think in terms of front lines. They still think war has boundaries." He activated his communicator. "All teams move in. We're going to remind them that war is everywhere." The fuel depot exploded an hour later. 60 ships suddenly had no fuel. They couldn't fight. They couldn't even move. They were stranded. Ho's team was already gone, heading to the next target, a manufacturing plant that made ship parts, then a food storage facility, then a communications hub. This was a kind of warfare they had never experienced, not defeating armies in glorious battle, but destroying the things that let armies function: logistics, supply chains, infrastructure. Back on Earth, Tactical Officer Sung coordinated a different kind of weapon: information. "Broadcast this on all channels," she told her team. She showed them footage: ships burning, soldiers retreating, casualties being loaded onto medical ships. "Won't this make them fight harder?" asked her assistant. "No," Sung said. "It will make them think. Right now, the government tells their people they're winning. They say humans are weak, that victory is certain. We're going to show them the truth. We're going to make every soldier wonder if this war is worth dying for." The broadcasts went out across space. At first, the government tried to block them, but humans were good at bypassing security. The footage reached homes, families, soldiers on the front lines. The messages were simple. "This is what your government isn't showing you. This is what the war really looks like. Is this worth it?" On the protests began, small at first: families who had lost loved ones, citizens who questioned why they were fighting humans who had done nothing to them. Emperor tried to suppress the protests, but suppression only created more anger. The people had been told this would be a quick war, a lesson taught to primitives. Instead, it had dragged on for months with no end in sight. Captain commanded a new ship now. The Steadfast had been destroyed in a battle 3 months ago. His new ship was called the Relentless. The name fit the way humans fought. He prowled the edges of territory with a pack of similar ships, never engaging in fair fights, always hitting weak points, always retreating before the enemy could mass their forces. "Captain, we have a target," reported. She had survived the destruction of the Steadfast and stayed with supply convoy, 20 cargo ships, 5 escorts. Just 5 escorts was suspicious. That's too few. Maybe they're running out of warships to protect their supplies. Thought about that. 6 months ago, they could have spared 50 ships to guard a convoy. Now they could only spare 5. That said something about how the war was going. All ships attack pattern Omega. Hit fast, hit hard, run before they can respond. The attack lasted 7 minutes. All 20 cargo ships were destroyed. 3 of the 5 escorts were crippled. Lost 1 ship, but the rest escaped. More importantly, those cargo ships had been carrying supplies for forces at the front line. Supplies that would never arrive. Troops that would go hungry. Ships that wouldn't get spare parts. Governor was still fighting. The colony was a wreck now. The farms were destroyed. The buildings were damaged. But the people survived. They hid in bunkers and tunnels. They emerged at night to strike at forces. The garrison commander had been replaced 4 times. Each one came expecting to pacify a farming colony. Each one learned that these farmers knew how to fight. "We can't keep this up forever," Park told during a rare moment of rest. He looked older now. They all did. 6 months of constant warfare aged people quickly. We don't need forever, replied. We just need to last long enough for Earth to finish mobilizing. Every day we survive is one more day they prepare. How many have we lost? Park asked quietly. Closed her eyes. Too many. 3,000 dead. Another 2,000 wounded, out of 50,000. And they've lost 15,000 soldiers trying to pacify one farming colony, laughed bitterly. We're teaching them a lesson, just not the one they wanted to teach us. Engineer Myra's factories had been producing weapons for 6 months straight. The output was staggering. Millions of missiles, thousands of ship weapons, entire fleets of combat vessels. How are we doing this? Asked, exhausted from another 18-hour shift. How are we matching this production? They have 100 worlds. We have one solar system. Myra looked at the production charts. Because we're desperate and desperation makes people efficient. Because every factory on Earth is working for the war effort. Because we haven't fought a war like this in 2 centuries, so we have a lot of catching up to do. She paused. And because we're good at building things that destroy, we've had a lot of practice. The empire was starting to fracture. Their economy was struggling. Half their fleet was committed to fighting humans, which meant they couldn't maintain their other territories. Pirate attacks increased. Border disputes with other species flared up. Emperor called an emergency council meeting. His advisors looked worried. Some looked scared. The war must end, said his chief economic advisor. We cannot sustain these losses. Our people are protesting. Our allies are questioning our strength if we continue. If we surrender to humans, we will be destroyed, roared. Every species in the conquered will see us as weak. They will challenge us. They will take our territory. The empire will collapse. My emperor, said his military advisor quietly. The empire is already collapsing. This war is destroying us from the inside. The humans haven't just beaten our ships. They've beaten our economy, our morale, our confidence. They've shown the galaxy that the empire can be defeated. Then we send more ships. We commit everything, My emperor, we have already committed everything. We have no more to give. Admiral Bin stood on the bridge of his flagship and reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The empire was falling apart. Their fleet was scattered. Their economy was in shambles. Their people were tired of war. We're winning, Lieutenant said. She sounded surprised. Yes, Bin agreed, but look at the cost. He showed her the human casualty reports. 40,000 dead, 100,000 wounded, 20 colonies damaged or destroyed. Half the human fleet was gone. This is victory, asked. This is war, Bin corrected. Real war, not the conquered civilized games. This is what happens when 2 species fight for survival. Both sides bleed. Both sides suffer. The only difference is which side can take more pain. And we can take more pain than We've had more practice, Bin said grimly. Humans nearly destroyed themselves twice in their history. We know what it's like to fight to the edge of extinction. The forgot. 800 years of easy warfare made them soft. They thought they were strong because they won battles, but they never learned how to survive a real war. The emperor sat alone in his throne room. Reports covered the floor around him. Everyone brought worse news. The conquered council was demanding he end the war. His own people were demanding it. His economy was in ruins. His military was demoralized. His allies were abandoning him. All because of humans, primitives who barely knew how to build starships, children who had only joined the conquered 20 years ago. But these children had teeth, and they knew how to bite. Had started this war to teach humanity a lesson, to put them in their place, to show the galaxy that the empire was still strong. Instead, he had taught a different lesson. He had taught the galaxy that humans were dangerous, that they fought without restraint, that they would burn themselves to ashes before they surrendered. And most importantly, he had taught the galaxy that the conquered civilized warfare was a lie A pleasant fiction that only worked when everyone pretended war wasn't really war. Humans had stopped pretending, and in doing so they had won. Reached for his communication device. His hands shook slightly. 300 years of ruling, and he had never felt so defeated. "Contact the human fleet," he said quietly. Tell them the Empire wishes to negotiate peace." His advisor stared. "My Emperor." "Do it, before there's nothing left of the Empire to save." The message went out, and across human space, tired soldiers allowed themselves to hope that maybe, just maybe, they might survive this war after all. But the war wasn't over yet. Peace negotiations would bring their own challenges, and the conquered council would have to face what humanity had proven. That war was never civilized. It was never honorable. It was never a game. War was horror. War was suffering. War was two sides trying to destroy each other until one side couldn't continue. And humanity had just reminded the galaxy of that terrible truth. The peace talks took place on Unity Station, the same place where Admiral Bin had been told to teach his species honor. Now he sat across from Emperor, and the entire conquered council watched. Looked different, smaller somehow, even though he was still massive. 6 months of war had broken something in him. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. Only weariness remained. "The Empire offers unconditional surrender," said. His voice was quiet. Around the council chamber, species whispered in shock. "The never surrendered. Never." Speaker Moth leaned forward. "Surely you mean conditional surrender, a negotiated peace." "No," said. "Unconditional. We cannot continue this war. We have lost too much. Our economy is destroyed. Our fleet is broken. Our people demand peace." He looked at Bin. "The humans have won completely. We acknowledge this." Bin felt no joy in the moment. He remembered the casualty reports. 40,000 dead, families destroyed, colonies in ruins. This didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. "We accept your surrender," Bin said, "but we need to talk about what comes next." "You wish to claim territory?" asked bitterly. "Take our worlds. That is your right as victor." "No," Bin said. The council chamber fell silent. "We don't want your territory. We want something else." What? Looked confused. Bin stood and addressed the entire council. "We want the conquered to understand what just happened. For 800 years, you've played at war. You made rules and traditions and pretended that violence could be civilized. You convinced yourselves that war was about honor and glory and beautiful tactics." He gestured to. "This war showed the truth. When survival was on the line, when everything was at stake, all those rules meant nothing. They tried to destroy us. We tried to destroy them, and both of us bled for it." Doctor stepped forward. She looked tired too. Everyone looked tired. "Humanity's gift to the galaxy isn't violence," she said. "We're not special because we're good at killing. We're special because we remember what killing costs. We remember that war is horror, that it destroys everything it touches, that even the winners lose." She turned to the council. "You forgot. You had 800 years of peace and you forgot what war really is. So when humans didn't fight the way you expected, you thought we were barbarians. But we're not barbarians. We're just people who remember." Moth spoke, his voice troubled. "What would you have us do? Return to unrestricted warfare? Abandon all attempts at civilization?" "No," Bin said. "Keep your rules, keep your traditions, but understand what they really are. They're not natural laws. They're agreements between species who all chose to limit themselves, and those agreements only work when everyone chooses to follow them." "Humans chose not to follow them," accused one council member. "Humans tried," Bin said firmly. "We tried to fight by your rules. Then they declared a war of extermination and removed all restrictions. They wanted total war. We gave it to them, and now everyone sees the result." Ambassador Na stepped forward. She was new to the council, but her voice carried weight. Humanity proposes new articles for the conquered charter. First, any species that declares extermination against another automatically forfeits all conquered protection and support. Make the price of total war high enough that no one chooses it. Second, she continued, establish humanity as peacekeepers. When disputes arise, when species talk about war, send humans to remind them what war really means. Not to fight, but to remember, to bear witness, to make sure no one forgets the cost. The council debated for 3 days. Some species thought humanity was overreaching. Others were terrified and would agree to anything to avoid human anger. Still others saw wisdom in the proposals. Finally, Moth spoke for the council. We accept Ambassador Nu's proposals. Humanity will serve as peacekeepers and witnesses, and the conquered charter is amended. Total war is now forbidden under any circumstances. Species who attempt it will face the combined might of the entire conquered. Stood slowly, and what of the Empire? What is our punishment? Ben looked at the Emperor who had tried to exterminate his species. Rebuild, help the colonies you destroyed, pay reparations for the damage you caused, and remember this war. Make sure your children know what happened. Make sure they understand that honor in warfare is a gift, not a right, and that gift can be taken away when one side chooses total war. We will remember, said quietly. The Empire will not forget this shame. It's not shame, Doctor said gently. It's a lesson. You learned what we learned 200 years ago, that the only way to survive is to choose peace, not because you're weak but because you're wise. 3 months later, Captain returned to exploration. The Relentless had been repaired and refitted, but this time when he entered new star systems, things were different. Captain, we're receiving a transmission, reported. It's from a species called the. They're having a territorial dispute with the. Both sides are threatening war. They're asking for human mediation. Smiled sadly. Set course. Let's go remind them what war really costs. When they arrived, both the and had fleets ready. Weapons were charged. Both sides were confident they would win a quick, honorable war. Showed them footage from the human war. Burning colonies, destroyed ships, casualty lists, families mourning. This is what you're choosing, he told them. You can have your war. You can follow all the rules. You can make it as civilized as possible. But in the end, people will die. Homes will burn. And both sides will lose something they can never get back. The commander stared at the footage. But they insulted our honor. We cannot let that stand. Is your honor worth this? Asked, showing footage of a destroyed city. The two sides talked instead of fighting. They compromised. They found solutions. Not because they wanted to, but because had shown them what the alternative looked like. Governor oversaw the rebuilding. The Empire sent engineers to help. It was awkward at first. The same species that had tried to destroy them now worked beside them, repairing farms and homes. Park worked alongside an engineer named. They didn't talk much at first. What could they say? They had spent months trying to kill each other. Finally spoke. I lost a brother in this war. Park was quiet for a moment. I lost my daughter. They worked in silence for a while, then said, was it worth it, all this death and destruction over territorial disputes? No, Park said simply. War is never worth it, but sometimes you don't get to choose. Sometimes it chooses you. The humans could have destroyed the Empire. You won. You had the right. Destroying you wouldn't bring back my daughter. It would just create more grieving parents like me. What's the point? Looked at the human with something like respect. Your species is strange. You fight without mercy, but you make peace without revenge. We remember what revenge costs, Park said. We tried it before, it didn't work. Back on Earth, Admiral Ben retired from active duty. He had spent 6 months watching people die. He was tired. He wanted peace. But he gave one final address to the human military forces. We won a war we didn't start. We survived when they tried to exterminate us. We showed the galaxy what humans can do when pushed to the edge. Be proud of that, but never celebrate it. Remember the cost. Remember the dead. Remember that every victory in war is bought with blood and pain. And remember that the goal is never to fight. The goal is to make sure no one wants to fight. We're peacekeepers now, not because we're peaceful, but because we know what happens when peace fails. Carry that knowledge, share it. Make sure the galaxy never forgets. Lieutenant was promoted to captain. She commanded a ship that patrolled the borders between species, watching for conflicts. It was boring work most of the time. That was good. Boring meant peaceful. One day she received a message from a young officer. "Captain, I'm stationed near human space. I wanted to ask, how do your people do it? How do you remember the cost of war without letting it consume you?" Thought about that. We tell stories, we build memorials, we teach our children. We make sure every generation knows what their grandparents lived through, not to make them afraid, but to make them wise. "I will do the same," the officer said. "My people need to remember too." Doctor published her final report on the war. It became required reading for all conquered species. The title was simple: What We Forgot and What Humans Remembered. The conclusion read, "For 8 centuries, the conquered believed that civilization meant removing the barbarity from war. We created rules and traditions and convinced ourselves that we had evolved past our violent nature. But we hadn't evolved. We had simply forgotten. Humanity didn't remind us through philosophy or argument. They reminded us through blood and fire and desperate survival. They showed us that war is not a game, not a ceremony, not an art form. War is horror, and the only civilized response to horror is to avoid it at all costs. We owe humanity a debt, not for winning the war, but for teaching us to remember, for showing us that true strength isn't in the ability to fight, but in the wisdom to choose peace, and for being willing to stand as guardians, bearing the burden of memory so that others don't have to." 5 years later, the conquered had not had a single war. Disputes were still common. Arguments still happened. But when species started talking about fighting, human ships appeared. Human ambassadors arrived, and they brought footage, reports, and memories. Captain, now an admiral himself, stood before a gathering of young officers from across the conquered. They came from 20 different species, all training to be peacekeepers. "Why do humans serve as peacekeepers?" asked a young officer. "You won the war, you proved your strength, why not use it?" Smiled sadly. "Because we know something the rest of the galaxy forgot. Strength isn't measured in weapons or victories. It's measured in what you choose not to do. We could use our strength to conquer. We could use it to dominate. But we've tried that before, back when we only fought ourselves. It nearly destroyed us. So instead, we use our strength to protect peace. We use our memory to prevent war. We use our experience to teach wisdom. That's the real gift humanity gave the conquered. Not victory, but memory. Not power, but understanding." He looked at the young officers. "You will be peacekeepers too. You will stand between species and remind them what they're about to choose. It's hard work. It's thankless work. But it's the most important work in the galaxy. Because war is easy, peace is hard, and someone has to remember why peace is worth fighting for." The officers nodded. They understood. They had all seen footage. They had all read the reports. They had all learned what humanity had taught the galaxy. That war was never civilized. It was never honorable. It was never a game. And the only way to prevent it was to remember. Always remember. Humanity didn't start the war. They ended the delusion. And in doing so, they gave the galaxy something more valuable than victory. They gave it peace.